Okay. So I recently have been studying a lot of Jewish history, and the reason why I've been studying a lot of Jewish history is because I've been taking a class about riots, a class about the history of Islam, and I've also been studying the Israeli and Palestinian conflict.
A curd
Um,
is a curd.
and all of these classes, I've been learning about history and anti-Semitism specifically, and anti-Jewish pogroms and all these other historical events. In the riot class, this is in part due to the fact that my professor for the class to teach me about riots. I think the class is called literally urban explosions, is because they gave me a lot of examples of anti-Jewish mobs that happened in Spain. During, say, the Spanish Inquisition and other periods of time. And when I saw Matt Walsh's comments about the Inquisition and trans activists, it kind of perked up my ears a little bit, because what he's talking about is stuff I just learned about, and to me is completely not comparable to what he's saying. So we're going to listen to what he has to say about trans activist cancel culture and the Spanish Inquisition.
This doctrine is spread and propagated by force. What you're witnessing in videos like, as for the videos, they demonstrate an important point: that gender ideology, more than any other leftist doctrine, is spread and propagated by force. What you're witnessing in videos like this is a modern form of forced conversion. Gender activists compel normal people to affirm their doctrines under threat of public shaming, loss of income, or violence, or all three in some cases. In a forced conversion centuries ago, or even today in some parts of the world, you may have been coerced into affirming a religious doctrine under threat of being burned at the stake. Now you're coerced into affirming the doctrines of the gender cult under threat of having everything else in your life, aside from your physical body, incinerated. Trans activists are basically what your public school history teacher told you the Inquisitors were. The difference is that the Inquisition has been caricatured. I mean, it was far more defensible than modern day cancel culture is, especially the cancel campaigns waged by trans activists. Also, in this Inquisition of today, the Inquisitors are not trying to coerce a belief in or submission to any sort of eternal celestial God. Rather, they themselves are the gods. At least that's what they believe. And they want us to believe, or pretend we do, all while posturing as the victim in an exchange that they instigate with someone who does not want to be a part of it. That's how the game works, and it is repulsive.
Matt Walsh is probably one of my favorite conservatives, not because I agree with him on everything. I despise his politics, but because he is one of the most honest conservative commentators, because when he thinks something, he just says it. He's not held back by political correctness, which means a lot of statements he makes, which is completely idiotic, we just get completely unfiltered. And this is one of the examples. Now, I could talk at length on the specifics of the Spanish Inquisition and cancel culture and how they're not comparable, and forced conversions is not happening in the United States. I could talk about how, for example, the Spanish Inquisition was endorsed by the government and government officials, and it was sanctioned by the government, meaning that when the public did these things, it was sanctioned by the government. And just one administration ago, the vice president, if we're talking about forced conversions, endorsed conversion therapy. This man right here, little Mikey Pence boy, endorsed conversion therapy, which included things like lobotomies and electroshock treatment. So if we're talking about forced conversions, I think the presidential administration you supported might be a little more on the nose when it comes to actually endorsing literal, as in very specifically literal, forced conversions. It's also hard to compare it due to the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene, extremely transphobic politician, when the politician across from her office had a trans flag erected because their child was trans, she decided to put up a sign that's like, there's only two genders, and boy equals boy, girl versus girl, the obvious implications. And if those people can get elected to public office as openly transphobic, and Trump had the trans military ban and many other policies around that, or went after the adoption rights of gay people by trying to fight to continue to fund adoption centers that do not adopt out of gay people, taking gay people's tax dollars and then not servicing them. If they're able to get elected to public office, the idea of them being forcibly converted is ridiculous to me. How can you be forcibly converted if you're getting elected to public office off of these ideas? I find that ridiculous. But the thing that really got me here was what he said in around the middle of this. And this is the thing I want to concentrate on more than the ridiculousness of comparing the Spanish Inquisition to trans activists.
Trans activists are basically what your public school history teacher told you the Inquisitors were. The difference is that the Inquisition has been caricatured. I mean, it was far more defensible than modern day cancel culture is, especially the cancel campaigns waged by trans activists. Also,
so the baby getting in trouble for saying homophobic stuff and possibly losing sponsorships or business deals, I think is much more defensible than the Spanish Inquisition. Now, first, I want to know what he means by caricatured. The Spanish Inquisition was enforced through burning people at the stake for having different religious beliefs. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were expelled from the country and discriminated against en masse. People were killed, burnt at the stake for their religious beliefs. The baby losing a music festival is not comparable. But where's the mischaracterizations? Where's the caricature of the Spanish Inquisition that we've heard that makes it more defensible? Where was the burning at the stake like a defensible state? When the Jews were getting expelled from Spain? At what point was that defensible? Anti-Semitism has a long history in Spain. One that I cannot get into in the length of this discussion. But I'm trying to figure out exactly what he means by it's been mischaracterized. I would love to talk to Matt Walsh about how he thinks the Spanish Inquisition was mischaracterized. The Spanish Inquisition was the government saying, this group of people who believes different things than us when it comes to religion must be forcibly converted, slaughtered, and expelled from the country. And don't think this only applied to Jews. I'm just bringing Jews up specifically because that's the angle I've been learning about most recently in my studies. So I want to know how it's been mischaracterized. But the comparison of that Spanish Inquisition to the baby getting canceled or anyone getting canceled, when people died, people were expelled from the country, and people were forcibly converted from their religion, when we've got politicians who are actively transphobic and openly transphobic and just say wild shit like about Jewish space lasers, that's wild to me. In fact, there's certain politicians like Matt Gaetz, for example, who not only is transphobic, but is also going to court for diddling kids. And there's a certain group of people out there like, woohoo, yeah, get them. And he's still in Congress. I mean, look, there's certain aspects of whatever you want to call cancel culture that I don't like. The rushing to judgment, stuff like that. Ironic coming from me, I know. But to compare it to this historical tragedy and at the same time try to play defense for this historical tragedy while complaining about forced conversions is wild to me. Absolutely wild to me. Definitely considering that the presidential administration he voted for had a vice president, this man right here, who endorsed conversion therapy. And that has conversion in the name, so you can't, rip that away. And he had that up to 2015 on his website. And he became Donald Trump's running mate. When? When did those discussions happen? Literally around the same time frame. Anyway, Matt Walsh is a silly man who I think needs to open a history textbook. And again, I'm really curious. I'm legitimately curious. I'd actually legitimately talk to him about where does he think the mischaracterizations of the... I mean, he didn't even just say it was mischaracterized. He said it was... Let's hear it one more time. 1 second.
The difference is that the Inquisition has been caricatured. I mean, it was far more defensible than modern...
It was far more defensible. So how was it far more defensible? How was the expulsion of Jews and the burning of people at the stake and the massed persecution and the massed actual forced conversions far more defensible? It's so wild for me to hear people like complaining about like religious extremism abroad and how they're coming to destroy America or do this or do that. And then one sentence later, endorse or try to play defense for actual religious extremist motivated violence like the Spanish Inquisition. Wild to me. Far more defensible. He doesn't expand on that later in the show. I did check. He did not expand on his views on the Spanish Inquisition. That's why I'm so curious. Anyway, and that's enough for Matt Walsh. What a strange man.